In
Just get the last.
preparation, I watched a video. It was about 8 minutes long. It was directors talking about why Kubrick was great. I think there were 6 of them. Good ones. I like the directors. Alfonso Cuarón that was on there. Anyway, every one of them talked about his greatness at style wasn't the word they used, but just the technical skill that he puts into his movies. That they always look right, sound right, you know. And I think that's true no matter which one, whether it's one I don't care for, it's one I love. I think that part is always true. He gets it right.
Yeah, isn't that the most common complaint against him, that he's just a technician, like a soulless technician, and that, he constructs these films that just are like Lego sets or something. I think somebody said something similar in a review of 2001. It's like a kid with an erector set or something.
I don't think that it has to be a negative. I mean, obviously, on one level, it's a positive. But if so many people who love his work, that's what they go for first, then I start wondering, well, what about what point he's trying to get across?
Yeah.
And I forget which one of them, Spielberg maybe, he said, he does something different every time. Got to admire that too. And again, I agree. But at some point, I wonder why it'd be nice if he was known for more than just the technical skill of his movies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of directors like that. He's not the only one where I feel that way. So,
right.
Maybe he's the most accomplished of those, maybe.
I mean, Spielberg gets like that at times, right? Obviously, he's very emotional in some of his films. You couldn't be more of an emotional director. But then he has that other side to him where I guess it's almost like it's his Kubrick side, Like Altman has this one side where he makes Nashville and all these kind of free-flowing films, but then he also wanted to be Bergman, and he'd go off and he'd make Three Women or Images or these really weird arty films. So I don't know. I think Altman actually kind of liked Kubrick too.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Scorsese was also one who was interviewed, and he spoke specifically. He said the inspiration that he gets from Kubrick is that when he's making a movie and he thinks, well, is this really good enough? Then he thinks, Kubrick wouldn't say it was good. In and do it again until he got it right. He changed this little thing or that little thing. And, as a director, then you think, well, I want to do that too. It doesn't necessarily mean the audience is rewarded or the actors who have to do it. But Scorsese himself, as a man who's making a movie, he's inspired to always want to get it a little bit better because of what Kubrick had accomplished.
Could there be two more dissimilar directors? I mean,
yeah,
in many ways. If I thought of out of all those 70s American directors, so one I think might be most like Kubrick. I don't know if this is right, but De Palma in some ways seems sort of like Kubrick, much more than Coppola or Scorsese or Spielberg. Although I'm contradicting myself, as I said, Spielberg has that side, but De Palma would be the one that I would kind of align with Kubrick.
Like that, yeah. Because of the way he can construct them in a mechanical way.
Yeah.
Something like The Fury, it's like, well, but look at how perfect it is for a piece of junk,
Yeah, he's the director of sequences, and he just, everything is planned so meticulously. And then I like a bunch of De Palma films, but I don't know how often, other than Casualties of War, I don't know if there's a De Palma film. There probably is, if I think about it, but that I actually find moving.
Who else but De Palma?
Carrie Blow
with pulling off a copy of the Odessa Steps. That's ridiculous. You see that, you think it's going to be a comedy.
Yeah, I know, to go to all that. Well, Woody Allen did, right? Did he have Odessa Steps?
Oh,
yeah.
In a very different sense. Sorry, I've kind of hijacked this intro, Scott.
No, I think it's okay, actually. You could just probably use that and use it as a launch for The Shining. So that is The Shining is the next one, right? Yeah.
And I
1980.
wanted to just say, I think actually this division makes perfect sense because I think those 3 films we did last week are of a piece. But then I was thinking these 3 that we're going to talk about tonight, they're just so much meaner and kind of nastier than. Now, Clockwork Orange, that's the one that almost belongs with these last 3. You could take that out of sequence, but there's a definite change in these last 3.
Interesting. Well, how so with starting with The Shining?
Well, again, because he's coming from Barry Lyndon, which in some ways is by Kubrick standards is kind of it's a cold film, but there's something humane about it. But then he takes this turn, which is really interesting. He waits 4 years, not a long time. Probably for him, that's 2 relatively quick films. He comes back with The Shining, which is just so far away. And The Shining is kind of a mean film, and Full Metal Jacket is a mean film, at least certainly the first half. And Eyes Wide Shut, when we get to that, we can talk about that's like a really nasty film. So it seemed, I don't know if that comes out of his disillusionment with filmmaking or the industry or whatever. I don't know why he would be disillusioned. So much attention was paid to him. Obviously a very rich man and probably had the dream life of a lot of directors off in England making his own, making films exactly the way he wanted. But there is a sourness in these last 3 films, I think.
Like beyond the story itself that he's telling.
Yeah, you're right. You always got to remember everything's in service to the story he's telling. I mean, that nastiness may actually, I've never read the book The Shining. I mean, all the nastiness I see in the film could well be everything's from the novel. And Eyes Wide Shut is an adaptation of a novel. Full Metal Jacket, I think, is an original script. There seems to be a kind of an extra nastiness there,
Well,
which is part of why these films, I think, are good. But
I think Marcus, who loves The Shining, I think it's the only Stanley Kubrick film he loves. He does use the word nihilism.
Yeah, I always found it. I don't know. He loves it in an odd sort of way, right? He just seems to think it was. He always mentions the blood spilling out of the elevator. He seemed to love that particular thing, and he got to say "Let it bleed."
Right. Yeah, that's funny.
I mean, I don't know. I went back just because I want to talk about The Shining's influence on Twin Peaks. I went back and read Marcus's comment on Twin Peaks: The Return today, and I actually quite liked it. It was good.
He liked the Twin Peaks Return, right?
He did. He wrote. I'll get to when we get into more specifics. I'll talk about similarities I see, but he did. He wrote really well about it, I thought.
I've only seen The Shining twice myself. First time saw it a long time ago. And of course, I know the iconic scenes well. And I did watch it recently. I felt I liked it quite a bit more this time when I watched it, but there's something that still prevents me from completely loving it. I don't know what it is. It's definitely not the look of the film and the score, which I thought was great. Maybe it's a little bit Jack Nicholson. I think a lot of the film does ride on him. And, he's very Jack Nicholson-like in the movie. And maybe this is one of the early films where he sort of becomes that person. I don't know. There's just something, I felt like I was getting a little bit tired of Jack Nicholson, maybe 90 minutes into it or something. I don't know. There's something about his performance.
I think one common complaint about Nicholson's performance is that it's supposed to be a descent into madness, and yet in that opening interview, he just decocks his eye, and he looks half crazy already, right?
Yeah.
And go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I agree with that, and I think something similar happens with Shelley Duvall, who doesn't go progressively more neurotic, we'll call it. She's screwy from the beginning. And I think it should be better if it was like the hotel and the descent of her husband all comes together to move her to a different place. But as with the Jack Nicholson character, I feel like she's kind of neurotic at the very beginning.
See, I don't know how you guys feel. They have to be one of the most. We talked about Alicia Cook Jr. and what's her name, Marie Windsor, right? Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson. That is the most implausible couple I can think of. Like, what? She's this borderline simpleton. She's so pure almost. And you're right. She's cocky and Shelley Duvall weird. And he's Jack Nicholson at his most kind of lecherous, and Jack Nicholson conjugate that into an adjective. Jack Nicholson, like, they make no sense together as a couple. Like, I don't get it.
I often feel with her, with the exception of Altman, obviously, that I think, why did they cast Shelley Duvall here? I love Shelley Duvall. And Altman proves that she can do wonderful things with a sympathetic director. So when I see things like The Shining, I think, why did they want her in this movie? So that they could not torture her in the real sense, although apparently she was.
Yeah.
But also the character itself. It's like there must, I don't know, I can't name one, but there must have been some other better choice. As you say, Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall, odd couple for no apparent reason. And so I think, poor thing, she should just go back to making Robert Altman movies where she's always fine. And he knows to accept and draw in her kind of goofiness.
I find her kind of moving at times, when he's taken the axe to she's credibly distraught. And you're right, supposedly they were just awful to her on the set to get that out of her, which is weird. But I do find her affecting at times, but at other times she just seems, I don't know. Again, when she's come down, says, "Hey, I'll make you a sandwich later." He's ready to just like take a shotgun to the whole family. There's such a disconnect there.
I thought she seemed like an abused wife or something. They don't. Well, I mean, there's the suggestion. Well, not the suggestion. I guess there's the mention of how he did the thing to his son, and it was, a quote unquote accident, and clearly he's deranged to have done something like that. But I wonder if it felt like that was a little bit in her performance too. Maybe an underlying thing, I don't know. But I was actually going to ask you, as a parallel, a movie I watched fairly recently, again for the first time in a long time, was 5 Easy Pieces, obviously with Jack Nicholson. Any parallel you can draw between? I mean, his marriage to Karen Black seems a little odd. I mean, maybe they're more like high school sweethearts or something, and they just went different ways or something. But they're very different as well, right? Like,
yeah, but I don't think they're married in that movie.
No, they're not married.
No.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, so they're just a couple then.
Yeah. No, they're
okay.
they're a mismatched pair too, and actually some of the mismatch is similar in a way, in that she's sort of clinging and he just wants to be left alone, and she's got this really clingy aspect to her.
I feel like Rafelson uses that. I don't hate Karen Black in that movie. I love when she's at the house. You guys got a TV? And I'm like, oh, go for it, And the point of her character establishing that side of Bobby Dupuy, and then the more cultured side, I think it serves a purpose. And to me, she's quite lovable in her annoying way. I couldn't say that about Shelley Duvall's character in The Shining. And Nicholson also, you pointed out, as he went on in his career, in 5 Easy Pieces, he's obviously Jack Nicholson, but he's not over the top Jack Nicholson for the most part.
Yeah, I see a big gap there between the two.
When do you think Jack Nicholson became that guy?
Well, I think you're onto something there, Scott. I think this might have been a turning point, because I'd have to look. What was he doing? What did he do between Cuckoo's Nest and Shining?
That's what I was trying to remember.
He did some smaller.
Is Missouri Breaks in there?
Yeah,
Missouri
he did
Breaks,
some smaller, not very successful films. Missouri Breaks. He directed himself in Going South, which I've never seen. But I don't think he has a huge iconic Jack Nicholson film between those two. So in a way, and I haven't seen the Missouri Breaks either. Yes, I have. I did see it. I actually thought it was pretty good. But I think this is sort of the beginning of that. Postman Always Rings Twice comes after, and that came with a lot of advance notice, and was sort of not that great. But I think this might be the beginning of that. What happened to all those guys in the 70s, where they end up playing themselves, right? One thing about his performance, especially, and this might be part of why Scott, me too, why it's sort of hard to get a handle on it. It does seem to owe a lot to silent film acting. I think Nicholson, maybe I read that somewhere that planted the idea, but Nicholson especially, with just there's so much exaggeration at times. He seems to be in the mind of some of the silent film performers. I'm going to throw out a couple of notes here. The first, I'm going to start with a place that really has nothing to do with Kubrick. I mean, it's everything to do with him, but is it a good horror film? I was thinking, I think at best, for me, it's the third best Stephen King film. Carrie's definitely ahead of it. I think The Dead Zone is definitely a better film. I might even put Cujo ahead of it. It's just a horror film. I don't know. Do you guys think it's a good horror film?
In the second half, once it becomes a real horror film, I think it's great as a horror film, but it takes time to get there. But yeah, when I reevaluated it for this, I bumped it up a little bit in my evaluation because I thought it worked as a horror movie once they got there.
So you like the second half better than the first half? Sort of all the. Okay, interesting. Certainly the twins, the Diane Arbus twins, they're disturbing. That's a great iconic horror film image. I don't know if there's anything else that I would say is great horror beyond those twins.
It's interesting. As you were mentioning other Stephen King adaptations, and I was thinking how it compared and said how I like the horror aspect of The Shining. But now you guys got me thinking about just horror movies in general. And I wouldn't put The Shining as high as, I don't know, recent. The Babadook. The Babadook doesn't just make you go, whoa, but it's about something. It's about grief and motherhood, etc. And all without pushing it. It's always clearly supposed to scare us. And maybe it's those smaller movies. I don't know. But I can think of horror films of more recent vintage, not like Saws or whatever, but movies like The Babadook. And I'd watch that one again right now when I don't really want to watch The Shining. I did just watch it, so it's not fair.
I watched The Babadook.
I love the
I love the title because it reminds me of De Niro in in one of the Scorsese films. He calls someone the Mamaluke of the Year. Mamaduke. He's just mumbling gibberish. Reminded me of The Babadook. Or The Witch. The Witch is a recent one that a lot of people. Or what about that Midsommar?
I hated that one, no, personally.
Wasn't as good as The Wicker Man. I mean,
it's very, very similar, though, isn't it?
Very similar. I was just going to say, there's that famous comment, the Playboy interview with Stephen King, where Kubrick calls him up at 3 a.m. and says, "Do you believe in God?" And King wakes up. He's still rousing himself from sleep, and he says, "Yeah, of course I do." And Kubrick says, "I don't." And he hangs up. And King said that's why The Shining wasn't a great horror film, because you have to believe in God and to have any conception of true evil or something like that. And that's Kubrick wasn't.
Well, if you accept, and I don't know, I used to know more about King, but if you accept that The Stand is his greatest work, that's a book and miniseries and whatever about the battle of good and evil. So in that sense, you have to, even if you don't believe in God, while you're experiencing The Stand, you have to believe in God for the purposes of each of the story, because it's the ultimate battle. So maybe that's what King meant, is that in his mind, maybe The Shining should have been more of an ultimate battle than just one loony and one neurotic.
And now, have you guys both seen Room 237, the
No, I
documentary?
really want to. I definitely will watch that when it's available somewhere I can easily see it. I could probably buy it off YouTube or rent it off YouTube.
Did you see it, Stephen?
I did not.
Okay, well, it is really worth watching. I mean, it'll probably make you go back, even if you think you're finished with it, watch the film one more time, because the theories that these people have on The Shining, it's amazing. And they sound so crackpot, and then they start showing things from the film, and you're kind of sucked into it. Things that are amazing, like when Danny's sitting on the carpet playing with his toys. You know the scene where the ball rolls appears out of nowhere, and you look at this carpet, the design on the carpet, and they connect that to NASA. I mean, a lot of it is about the fate. The two of the main theories proposed in the film as to what The Shining's about is that number one is that it's Kubrick's apology for partaking in faking the moon landing. And they come up with all this evidence that seems weirdly credible. And then the other one is where the guy mentions offhandedly that the Overlook is on a native burial ground, that the film is immersed in all sorts of native stuff, and they go through and they pick out all sorts of stuff. But I think it was my favorite film that year. It's an amazing film, even for someone like me who's kind of likes The Shining but doesn't love it. I highly recommend it.
The one other thing I wanted to ask you guys about The Shining, I'd be curious to know your thoughts on two of the supporting performances, Danny Boyle and Scatman Crothers. And it's Scatman Crothers, I mean, is that maybe the only sort of prominent African American in a Stanley Kubrick film? I was trying to think. I mean, he didn't make very many films, so I couldn't think of another African American. Yeah, I guess in Full Metal Jacket, there's
Full Metal Jacket, and then there's the security guard. I mean, your point's well taken. The security guard in The Killing that gets a rough time at the hands of Tim.
And I mean, I don't think Kubrick is the only director of those eras to, that is true of. It's just something that did sort of strike me. And Scatman Crothers, the only two movies I'm pretty sure I've seen him in are that and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But what did you guys think of both of those performances?
I like Scatman Crothers. He's so incredibly normal next to, what did Stephen call him? The psychotic and the neurotic? He's just so normal. He's engaging and likable. And I think the kid is actually weirdly good too.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with both those points. I think I can't remember anymore. It's been a long time. I think the Scatman Crothers character has a different ending in the book, and it doesn't matter except I imagine at the time, again, I can't remember, but people who read the book and saw the movie, it's kind of like in Jaws. The Richard Dreyfuss character, I think, dies in the book, and then in the movie he pops up at the end, and that's surprising if you've read the book.
So he lives in the book?
Which one? Richard
Scatman Crothers. He survives?
Oh, I think. Okay. Yeah, he dies in the movie, so that probably. Yeah. And I can't remember. It's been a very long time. I thought he was delightful, but he's always delightful. I thought the kid was great. I think we've already hit the anecdote where Kubrick, to help the kid out and not frighten him, just kept telling him he was making a drama. He never told him he was making a horror film. It seems apocryphal because the kid's got to say red rum. You got to know. But nonetheless, I think I mentioned this when I wrote about it. If that's true, it's one of the few times you ever hear a story where Kubrick was actually looking out for one of his actors.
Humane, yeah.
He usually just torments them, but he missed the kids because he tried to lead the kid through that part. And the kid does a good job, I think so. I think so too.
And I don't think other than those two and the two principals, there's really a performance. Well, I guess you could say Grady, the guy that plays Grady.
Just on Danny Boyle and Scatman Crothers, I'll just say I think maybe my favorite scene in the movie, and this goes a little bit back to your question about is it a good horror film? It's not. This is the sort of thing I think of as horror, but it's not your typical horror. But I love the scene with those two early on, where Scatman Crothers is kind of trying to sort of like he lets the kid know, I know what you're capable of doing, and he's very sympathetic to him. Like it's a very sort of moving scene in a way, but it sort of is where it starts to be like, okay, so something very eerie and strange is going to happen here. And I just really like the way those two communicate with each other. I
That's
really
where he
like
asked
that.
him about
I
room
love
two.
that scene. Yeah,
He
that's
asked him about room 237,
yeah, that's
right?
where he's telling him about
He
the
needs to
room.
know
Don't
about
go,
that.
don't go in the room. And the other thing with Danny Boyle is Kale points out a great scene early in her review where he's and it's one of those technically proficient shots where he's riding the tricycle around the hotel.
Oh,
And
yeah,
I'm
those are
glad
great.
she pointed out, and I did catch this before I went back and read her review, but again, this is Kubrick's genius with sound, the way the sound works in that scene where the kid is on the carpet and the wheels get muffled and then he goes on
Yeah.
the concrete or whatever, and it's really loud, and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenally done. I mean, I like that, I am attracted to that kind of technical excellence or whatever. So it's
Well,
really,
there's another comparison to Twin Peaks then, because Lynch did the sound for Twin Peaks and it's obsessed with sounds and weird sounds. I just wonder, I could be way wrong. Are you getting the kid's name wrong, Scott?
I thought it was
Danny Boyle's a director, isn't he?
Train spotting guy.
Danny Lloyd. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was
As
gonna-
I was saying Danny Boyle, I'm like, yeah, Danny Boyle, isn't he like Irish or something?
Dub that back. I was thinking to myself, he's kind of train spotting. I don't know.
That's
I know
funny.
he went on and he did
Yeah,
Slumdog
that's funny.
Millionaire.
Slumdog
I'll have
Millionaire
to
and
flash that.
the zombie movie.
In
I
Marcus's
thought
review of The Shining, I'll just say quickly, he actually
Yeah.
highlighted Danny Lloyd as well. He said he's one of the few kids in a movie like that who isn't like cloying,
Yes.
and I think he actually mentioned Spielberg. He says, if Spielberg had cast him, he would have been this lovable little kid that, you just wanted a hug or something like that. And they don't make him like that, right? So
I'd say that I thought they were the same year, but then I thought about it. No, Kramer versus Kramer is 79. I think the kid in that is great too. I wouldn't call him cloying. I think those two performances, which come within a year of each other, two of the most remarkable kid performances, or like real kids, 4 or 5 that I can think of.
Stephen, you've got 1 minute if you wanted to make that point. You were
That was an anecdote. There's a burger place in Davis, California. I think it might still be there. It was called Murder Burger. They featured ostrich burgers. And the people complained, so they changed the name to Red Rum Burger.
Red Rum Burger.
It was all okay then. And you can still get your ostrich burger there. I don't know if it's still open.
Red Rum.
Yeah.
What's the name of the guy inside him? Come on, quickly.
What?
Can't remember.
Tony.
Tony. Yeah. That's great. Okay.
So that's 40 minutes, right?
So on to Full Metal Jacket.